Welcome to the He Said,
She Said,
We Said podcast. I'm Todd.
I'm Pam.
And I'm number 4, Hope.
All right, guys. Today we're talking about, are you really understanding your kids? And this was an eye-opening experience for me. I learned this technique probably 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And I came home and I did this exercise. And all of a sudden I was like, I don't understand anybody ever that I've ever met that's a human. Wow. So we're going to play that game. It's going to take us about 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Bear with us. And I want you to play when I ask the questions. I want you yourself to answer the questions too. Today we're going to talk about the word peace. Right? We're going to talk about the word peace. So Hope, when I ask you the word peace, if you closed your eyes and you thought of an image, what image do you see?
Swinging.
Swinging, okay? If I were to say peace and ask you what sound peace is, what is it that?
Chirping birds.
Chirping birds. Great, okay? And if I were to say, what does peace feel like? What would you say?
I feel relaxed.
Relaxed, okay? And if you, we'll give one more. If you could come, if you take the word peace and it could put a smell to it, what would it be?
Apple pie.
Apple pie. That's funny. That's another story for another day. So if you think about it, if you answered these questions yourself, you would see that your definition of peace is probably way different than hers. Okay. And so those are the things we have to think about. I remember working with a friend of mine one time when we were using the word love, and he couldn't answer what it looked like, what it felt like, or what it sounded like. And I thought to myself, I looked at him and said, this is why you don't feel it, because you can't define it. And then he was like, oh, but it smells like grandma's apple pie. So I messaged his wife and was like, go get some Glade plug-ins, cinnamon apple. And it was crazy. Like 2 weeks later, we got together and he goes, you know, since that conversation we had, first time I felt loved in a long time. Yeah, she put Glade plug-ins in the house and he was smelling it all the time, reminding him of his grandma. But he couldn't feel that because of that, right? So the whole message today is around this, guys. How many times does somebody else say something and you interpreted it with your definitions and not theirs? And then the communication was polar opposite. Tell us any of your experiences on that type of situation, Pam.
So we were having a family meeting one time and you brought up like, hey, let's choose a word and let's go around the table and see what everybody feels or the differences.
I remember this one.
Yeah. And we did use the word peace. And you asked everybody, you know, what they felt like. For me, I really do love coffee. So the smell of coffee is peace for me. The feel of peace is warmth, you know. The sound of it is anything nature, right? So we went around the table and I think it was you asked Danielle, our eldest, what represents peace for you?
I remember that vividly.
Because it happened to represent the one thing that you would most be upset about is how much hot water is used in that house.
Well, and to be fair, let's tell the story here. It wasn't how much hot water she used. It was that it always felt strategic. Like, I know he's going to take a shower in 12 minutes. I'm going to go run it all out. Right. So, and I know that wasn't the case, but that's how it felt. And I remember that because she said what?
She said, when you asked what represents peace for you, and she said, the only time I feel peace is when I'm in a hot shower.
And she was probably 17 when she said this.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, my God, if I would have done this exercise 5 or 6 or 7 years earlier, if I'd have learned it at that point, I would not have been so upset about her taking hot showers, because if that's the only time she feels peace, why would I want to take that away from her?
Right, right.
And I think that's one of the things that we have to do is we have to be able to ask the right questions all the time and ask questions that's going to help us understand the people that are in our lives. Because, I mean, communication is not what you say. Communication is how they interpreted what you said.
Right.
Right. And I know sometimes I'll look at Hope and be like, hey, I need you to, I'll just use clean your room for an example, clean your room. And she's like, okay, 13 years later. Well, there was no time frame put on it. Dad, you just told me sometime in the near future. In the near future, I plan on living to 90. 13 years from now is still pretty near compared to 90 years from now. Hey, Hope, have you ever had a situation where you felt misunderstood by what you said, or maybe somebody said something and you misunderstood them?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, Dad, just the other day, I remember you asked me if I packed lunch, and I said yes.
Oh, I very much remember that. That was Wednesday, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it was. And I said, did you pack lunch? And you said, yes, absolutely. And she did. She packed her lunch. And then I dropped you off at school, right? And your mom and I went out and we got coffee. We did a little work. And I saw your lunch box in the bag. And I opened it up to see what you had packed. So I was going to run it over to the school. And could you tell our followers what you packed?
Remember?
You don't remember the only 6 cookies that you put in your lunchbox? Nothing else?
No, I did pack something else.
7 cookies.
No, it
There-
was the circle cheese. It was
They were
two of
not.
them.
There was 2 Cheez-Its.
No, not Cheez-Its. The circle cheese where you like.
No,
the-
it's the Baby Bell.
yeah, that.
Oh,
and the
2
wax.
Baby Bell cheeses and 7 chocolate chip cookies. Total miscommunication on our part because she did pack lunch. So stuff like that happens all the time, you know? And so I can remember this one time I asked one of our team members, you know, how was your day? And how was the weekend? Because I was out of town, and they were like, oh my gosh, it was overwhelming, right? And so I was like, overwhelming? Oh my gosh. Tell me what happened. Well, one of the instructors came in 15 minutes late, and then we had somebody show up that wasn't on the schedule for an intro lesson. Okay, was anybody there during that time? No, but they weren't on the schedule. And then 2 classes started 2 minutes late. And in my head, I was like, that's not how I would describe that. That's a typical day. Small stuff happens. But to them, that was huge. It was overwhelming. It was too much for them to be able to handle because somebody came in late and we had somebody show up for they wanted an appointment. They didn't want an appointment. And to me, that's just day-to-day life. But to them, that was overwhelming because if I call somebody and I'm like, Hope, I'm overwhelmed. Her brain should be like going haywire. Like, oh my gosh, the building's burning down. His car went off a bridge. The house exploded. What else could have happened to make him feel overwhelmed? Because overwhelm is so big for me. And I think as parents, that's the one thing we've got to remember with our kids is we're always listening with our ears, with our interpretation of what those words mean that they say. And we've got to really dig deep to understand how they define these words. Because once we do that, now we're living in their world. And when they come to us with something, we can give better answers. We can listen better, not just always give answers, right? But we can listen better. And then we can understand where they're at in their space and time because we understand what they're saying. You know, but to wrap up that story, not only did you just have the 2 little cheese things and the 7 chocolate chip cookies, but it was left in the car on top of that, which then created a bigger stress, right? That now we have to go get lunch, take it to the school. And if you think past that, if you show up to school with 7 chocolate chip cookies and your teacher sees that that's all that was packed for lunch today, I'm getting a note sent home, right? So sometimes miscommunication can lead to a much bigger situation than it should have been. So parents, listen, put in a little extra work, listen a little longer, ask a few better questions so that you can make sure you're truly understanding what your child's saying and what your child's going through. I mean, if I would have just followed up that day with, what did you pack? Or is it a nutritious lunch? Then I would have got much better answers and we would have been in a whole different situation. Hey, we want to thank you for being part of today's podcast. Make sure you're following us at Apple, Google, or Spotify so you can catch our next episode.